Good morning friends, this is Naga S. Siramal. I am working as Assistant Professor in the Department of Electronics and Communication Engineering. So as we know that, we are discussing about embedded system. In the part 1 and part 2, we discussed what is the definition of embedded system, what are the examples of embedded system, what are the main elements of an embedded system, and also we discussed embedded core of the system in the previous videos. In this video, I am going to explain what is CISC processor, complex instruction set processor, complex instruction set processor, complex instruction set processor or computer, then RISC, reduced instruction set computer. See, as the name indicates, the CISC processor having complex instructions, RISC processor having the reduced instructions. It has less number of instructions. Those instructions are very simple. That is the meaning of the RISC processor. Now we'll see the general diagram for the CISC processor. The CISC processor mainly consists of two parts. The one is compiler and the second one is the processor. So here the processor part is highlighted because the complexity is present in the processing. So normally execution of the program will be taken place with the different steps. The first will be the editor, then we have compiler, then linker, then loader, finally the execution. So these are the steps will be taken place while executing the program. In the editor part, the user is defining the instructions with respect to the programming task. Then compiler, it converts this high level language, that what user use the languages, that is English statement, that is high level language, that will be converted into the machine language. This machine language will be understood by the processor. That is the reason the compiler is used to convert the high level language to the machine level languages, that is in the form of binary number zeros and ones. Then that file will be linked with the library files with the help of linker and loader. Finally the .exe file will be generated in the execution level. So this is the process will be taken place for the execution of the instructions in the program. So in that case, in the CISC processor, the complexity is present in the processor part while performing the operation what the programmer wants. So that operation, that is for example if you consider arithmetic operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So while doing that operation, the processor will be the complexity in case of the CISC processor. In case of RISC processor, the complexity is present in the compiler. Nothing but while converting the high level language to the machine level language, the complexity is the presence in the case of the RISC processor, reduced instruction set computer. If you see the other differences, it has complex instructions, it has many instructions. So we have the complexity in the instructions, and reduced instruction set computer having simple instructions. Those are simple in operations. Then another difference is the CISC processor focus on the hardware part and RISC processor focus on the software part of the program. Complexity lies in processor. In case of CISC processor, the complexity is present in the processor as we seen in the diagram, and in case of RISC processor, complexity is present in the compiler part. The multiple clock cycles. In case of CISC processor, if you execute the instructions, it requires the multiple clock cycle. To execute the instructions, it taken place three processes, that is called as fetch operation, fetching, decode and execution. So these three processes will be taken place for the execution of the instruction, that is fetching, decoding and execution. Fetching in the sense it may take the data from the input devices or from the memory, that is a fetching operation. Then decode to convert that high level language to the machine level languages. Then finally .exe file will be generated. To do this, it requires multiple clock cycle. Each instructions present in the CISC processor requires multiple clock cycles to execute these operations, fetching, decoding and execution, multiple clock cycles. So if you consider one clock cycle, that is one edge to another edge, this is one clock cycle. Like that, multiple clock cycle required in case of CISC processor, but in case of RISC processor, we required only single clock cycle to perform fetching and decoding and execution of the instruction. Then transistors are used for store the instructions. In case of CISC processor, the transistors are used for storing the data in the memory. So that is the purpose transistors are used for memory purpose. In case of RISC processor, transistors are used for instructions in case of CISC processor. Then around 100 to 300 instructions are available in case of CISC processor, but in case of RISC processor we have few instructions, around 30 to 40 instructions are present in case of RISC processor. The addressing modes. The meaning of addressing mode is how the processor will fetch the data either from the input devices or from the memory. The fetching of the data, how the data will be fetched to the operation, that is called as addressing mode. In that addressing mode we have different types of addressing mode: register addressing mode, then direct addressing mode, indirect addressing mode, base index addressing mode. So like that we have different types of addressing modes. So here in case of CISC processor we have 8 to 10 addressing modes will be present, but in case of RISC processor we have very few addressing modes will be present because we have very less number of instructions. The other differences, the variable size of instruction. The instructions present in the CISC processor are variable size. The size is variable, but in case of RISC processor the size is fixed. It is of fixed length. So if you observe overall the main advantage between the CISC and RISC processor, the RISC having the more advantage. The one is simple instruction, that is nothing but it requires the single clock cycle for the execution of the instructions. If single clock cycle is required, the performance level of the processor will be increases. If the performance is increases, so you will get immediate the output. That is the main advantage of RISC processor. It has the required number of instructions will be available and also required number of addressing modes compared to the CISC processor. The main disadvantage of CISC processor is complexity is more. Thank you for watching this video. If you like, please share and subscribe.